Aber so vorhanden ist es sagen, die feine Sache eigentlich, das ist wirklich eine feine Sache. Da kann man echt Sachen aussetzen, nicht so problematisch an.
And you want to share, probably you want to share the screen at first. Okay, come here to
Also wenn man sagt, Hauptsache
okay. Click on that.
You will do it after.
Yes. Do you present now or?
No, later.
Okay.
Welcome back, everyone. We have a few more papers for today, so I hope you had a chance to refresh, get some nice salmon there from this Finnish village, and many other things that are out there. So, but now let's go back to our Middle Eastern things. And I'm very happy to present Sarah Savant, with whom I've been collaborating already for 2 years. Yeah, so she'll be talking about GitHub project that we're working on together. So.
Very good. Okay, thank you. And together is the right word. Austin and I very much working together on this. So let me just start with a couple of preliminaries, which I know we all know, but I think it's worth foregrounding because it's absolutely essential for the project we're working on. First is the size of the Arabic textual tradition. Enormous. Probably, as I'm very fond of saying, the largest up to this day, except for perhaps Sanskritic India, Tang China. But even then, I think perhaps larger if we use a periodization, which we are of 750 to 1500, with the argument that in that period you have some dynamics of textual transmission that justify treating a region from, let's say, Spain to modern Pakistan as somehow culturally related and interrelated. Second, there's a really important point, and there's an assumption that I think pervades our field about books, which is that they are unitary, that a book is a unitary object. I would like, however, to stress what I think many of us know, but is important to maybe foreground again, is the real sort of realities of books, which is that books are frequently chopped up and reconstituted. In fact, sometimes, very often even, survive only in fragmentary forms. And in fact, many modern editions that collapse different fragments to create a critical edition do some sort of violence to the actual way that communities received and worked with these books. Second, selection. Parts of some books at different points in time were salient and copied, but at other points in time, they were ignored. And this history of reception is incredibly important for understanding the meaningfulness of our texts. And third, reformulation. Pieces of older books, as we all know, were frequently incorporated into new ones, which themselves were then chopped up and reconstituted in this constant churning process that really, I think, explains something of the size of the Arabic textual tradition, if we just want to think in terms of processes. So in terms of kitab, I'm going to go through these points. I've been given a time limit, so forgive me for using paper, but I think it'll help me keep to my time. The general goal of kitab is to use text reuse detection methods for the purposes of studying these processes, breakdown, selection, and reformulation. We are interested in seeing how books were taken apart and reconstituted, what was taken up and what was reformed. Doing this, we really aim to address much deeper questions about how cultures remember. The line of thinking here very much follows that of Jan Ostman, and particularly how it has been extended in the thinking of Agnes Rigney, who has emphasized the extent, to quote her, to which shared memories of the past are the product of mediation, textualization, and acts of communication. The team of Kitab, who is Kitab? Well, Kitab is, firstly, I guess, the core group of us working on the project, 5 of us. me, Maxime, who I think needs no introduction, but is absolutely central to the project. We have then it's 3 major volunteers who are all putting their time in. We are a project, and I use that term because we're working very hard. We don't have funding, so we're working on a voluntary basis. And I have 3 sort of professional programming type folks. One who's doing the back end, Ahmed Saki, and then a front end developer, Malik Merchant, and then someone for the web page named Sahel Merchant. And all 3 of them were recruited from the Ismaili network, which supports, I'm from Aga Khan University, and the university has access to the Aga Khan's whole volunteer network, which is quite large. So we can also tap into other volunteers later, but this is about all we can manage right now. Partners, Greg Crane has been a major supporter of the tab from the very beginning. And David Smith, whose name's already been mentioned, we are developing from PATSM is our starting point for the project. I would also mention Marco Buchler, who some of you may know, in Göttingen now, and who we work very closely with. We have a user group, and one of the users here, Majid, and Yunus, you've also been a user. Sounds like drugs. So we have a group of 14 peer historians who are helping in the developmental phases by giving critical feedback. It's very important. We also have an advisory board that includes senior people in the field. So for the future, let me just say, I think it's important to talk about the intellectual goals, because in a way, we now have various digital methods, but it's a marrying of method to question that is really animating the work in these last 2 years. I'm working on the technology, but simultaneously trying to deepen the questions that we want to ask. And these are what we're using when we apply funding. So the first goal, we aim to create, and we're very far along in the process, the first open access research corpus and web platform for detecting and visualizing histories in the Arabic tradition in that period. We are doing this, as I've said, on the basis of work already done in computer science by David Smith, firstly, by Marco Buchler, and also, we hope, others. We will do as part of this project is sort of preempt some questions and also follow up on the corpus questions this morning. We aim to have verification of metadata to include author's name, publisher, editor, date and place of publication, and then other metadata, genre classification. So we, when we are applying for funding, we're asking for funding for this. Vetting for copyright. This is not a popular funding. It's not very easy to get funding for vetting for copyright, I've discovered. And we want to follow European Convention 30 years. Right now, the website is protected, so it's only password allowed. We're dealing with trying to decide how to deal with this problem. But we respect the issue of copyright, yet we have the issue of wanting to make it accessible. So I appreciate, suggestions along these lines. Second goal, the academic research goals, the study of the history of books in Arabic using text reuse methods. And we have 3 sort of angles that we're looking at this from. First, authors, second, form, and third, content. The first case study, we have these 3 case studies that follow these, deals with authorial practices. And we examine the way that authors worked with earlier texts and the phenomenon of widespread and extensive copying. I'm including not only earlier works, but also authors copying themselves, which we've discovered in our preliminary data to be quite widespread. We'll explore issues ranging from the meaning of authorship to how particular types of transmission contributed to the size of the Arabic textual tradition. Second, the changing forms of books. Focuses on the ways in which different forms filtered and shaped past meanings. So we're interested in this recycling process, and we're looking at things such as anthologies, multi-text compilations, extensions and abridgments, commentaries, and how these, you can see sort of the processes of taking up earlier bits and commenting, making meaning out of them. The premise we're exploring is that in each unique newly formed text, you have the generation of new types of meaning. and that these allow us to probe the cultural identity of the compiler or commissioner and to see how cultural, social, and moral heritage was passed on to successive generations. And then with narrative adaptations, this is probably the bread and butter of actually what most of us have done. We are examining the formation of narratives, often in conflict actually with each other, out of heterogeneous past materials. And so these are partly taking up the idea of Pierre Nora and sites of memory as a useful entry point into thinking about how an institution or an event or a date is the focus and then has a repeated return to narrative and revision to past texts. Okay. Good. Our third goal then is, second goal deals with history of books and in these case studies. The third deals with this issue of cultural memory. And we're interested in the processes of cultural memory as in a major pre-modern textual tradition. We're looking at the generative processes, the production of memory, the ways in which groups negotiated their shared past. And we have three specific questions that we've highlighted. The first, and there's not a slide on this, but the first is how were memories, and this is taking up very much Jan Assmann, how were memories communicated, circulated, and exchanged in the medieval Islamic world? Second, pertaining to the production, what can recombinations of previous texts in new textual forms tell us about the ways in which groups define themselves? And third, how did groups through text negotiate their shared pasts? Now, to get to some of the bread and butter of what we've done, we ran a pilot from January until November of this year. So I'm speaking now on very fresh, kind of finished work. And again, just to emphasize, this is a collaborative effort with the team. During the pilot, we've done a series of things, and I'll just outline them very quickly, but I'd be happy to answer more questions, and Maxime also can pick up some of the questions in the period that follows. First, Maxime, we used the corpus that Maxime discussed this morning. We've pre-processed the files, we've prepared them to run through Persian. We collected the basic metadata, again, this is off of Maxime's work, and we've made it usable for our application. Third, we lightly adapted, it didn't require enormous adaptation, we lightly adapted Persian, and we ran it. And we compared every single one of the texts. And we kind of are picking a number from thin air, how many unique texts we have. Let's say 4,500, that's the number I'm working with right now. 4,500 texts for the period of 750 to 1500, so cutting off, the 1900 portion of what he's working with. We compared every single one of those texts using PASM to every other one of those 1,500 texts. And this creates a data wall, essentially. And so what we've done is we've extracted and created a database of 75 using works that were suggested to us in a hackathon we ran in September. So in the hackathons, we had from user group 75 different texts that we then used the results of running the whole of the corpus against the whole of the corpus and created a database of indexed results so that in the data you can see every one of the 75 works mapped against every other one of the works in the corpus, which is a lot of works, as well as sort for the largest hits, so that you can see where you have the largest overlaps between two works. I can say a lot more about that if I after. We developed a visualization for text reuse that operates off of the database and aligns text and graphs the relationship between them with the ability of a user to browse books. And I'll show this in a minute just to illustrate. The hackathon participants used this visualization. They critiqued it very helpfully, and we've begun revisions to it, which I'll show in a minute. And then we developed a pilot website. This is our pilot website, which is up now. The search the corpus function, I'll give you at the end the information to log in. I don't want you on it now. Listen to me first. The search the corpus function is where the data is stored, where you can get into it. just to go through the site, so here you have, that's the top, of course, your preliminaries. We need a logo. We don't like our logo, but this is what we've done for now. And we have this sort of very first iteration of the application where you can have two books, and here's book 1, here's book 2, and if my internet was working, I would be able to show you how these drop down and you can select between them. You generate a visualization, text alignments. This, let me show you. Here is an example. In our data, right now on the website, there's only one example that you can see. For your future, it's the first book and the second book in the other column. Just keep it simple. And basically, the first book is the Ihya of Al-Ghazali. And the second is a work by Ibn Abi Dunya. And they are, there's some cases of light alignment, but this is probably actually not so significant, in terms of actual reuse and relationship between the books. But you can nonetheless see here charts of, so you have one work running along, let's say, the contents of along the x-axis, and imploded into it the second work and where they overlap. And in this case, you can see that that the overlap is quite small. It's segmented. We're working on how to break up the works, but now it's in 100-word segments. And there's some light reuse. This is the alignment down below. You can actually, highlight a word and it matches toggles between the two. And then you can go into the books and scroll up and down, to read for context within them. We need to add certain functions to this. We're aware this is the metadata we have. Again, as Maxine pointed out, this is just pulled from our databases. So it has not been verified. It has not been checked for copyright. Thus, the password protection on the site. Okay, yeah. So that's just the preliminaries on this. I could say more. We will be adding, other functions. The ability to do searches, within the database. The ability to do philological work. Since we have the corpus, we can add onto quite a lot rather easily. We've discussed adding resources, learning resources, maps, date on timelines, etc., to really make the site, we hope, a useful one for anyone working on Arabic literature. In terms of the next step, we're working on a series of use cases, and the idea is that over the next 3 to 4 years, we'll be developing these functionalities. But what I've just shown you is really based on a discovery kind of algorithm, which David's current version of Hassan, which does not allow you to do, I would say, numbers 2 to 5. But the first, if you want to discover the relationship between text, if you want to see roughly, where you have this heavy reuse between works, it works very well for that. However, in the future, we'll be doing what follows. Explore the makeup of complex text. So imagine, this all started, I should say, from me working with anti-plagiarism software and being aware that there's a whole lot of things you could probably do with anti-plagiarism software, although it's not suited to that. So, this is my imaginative attempt to think of what, if I had this box of toys, what would we do? And the team has been working very hard on these kind of thinking through what kind of problems to address. So explore the makeup of complex text. So you start with a complex text built out of earlier text and use this function to see how diverse elements may have come together into that text. The second one, chart the diffusion of text, is sort of the inverse of that. So you want to see the reception of a single work across time. We can talk about stem analysis in a minute, but let's start with the point that data does not necessarily tell you the relationship between these texts. We can take that for granted, I hope. We can discuss how actually these books may have historically been related. That's another issue. But you can just find the data of read for fine differences. The user identifies 2 or more works and queries the alignment between them, which highlight very slight word variations, paraphrase. These are built from sort of what might be computationally, we believe, the most simple to the most complex. And then the last one, which to me seems like the most complex, but I would really welcome input, is to collect common passages across the entire corpus. And this needs to be designed to allow for paraphrase, thus word nets and a whole series of other. In the future, this is designed to be modular, open access, can be adapted for other languages. We would also hope to work with Persian. We've already been discussing that tonight. We would hope to be able to do add transcription platforms, to add new text into the corpus. We've included from the very beginning the ability of people to upload their own texts, to work against the corpus, although they wouldn't be in the database. And it would require some work. But anyway, that's the fly case. So supporting tools, here we are, and the future. Now, just very briefly, because I realize I don't have a lot more time, I felt I have to show you some examples, just 2 examples. In this, there's many more. The users have produced already some good data. Maxime has used the application, I've used the application. We're only beginning actually to tap into the potential to use what we already have. We could spend a year, I think, just working on that in terms of data. So the first case involves authorial practices in terms of the use cases. And PASM allows us to gather the surviving sources upon which an author drew, or at least potential sources upon which an author drew, and thus to reconstruct potentially the library that an author was working with, or the fragments through which he came back to an original source more correctly. We took a book called the Thermal Clue, the Fruits of the Hearts of Nouns Among Nouns in Construct Form, as we might translate this, by Aladdin, who worked in Nishapur, and who died in 1038. It's a fascinating lexicon of 2-word phrases in adopted form, and it includes cliches and really memorable word phrases. And he completed it under the Ghaznavid dynasty, and for a patron whose library he actually mentioned, and says he used, and he just mentioned in the Arabic sources. Interestingly, he never mentions in the Thimar his own sources, but is very, very, very rarely, and it gives the impression of oral transmission, which is quite interesting. And however, just using, again, PASM and looking at our results, it was very easy to find a number of, what seem to be quite direct quotations. They're quite extensive, but they're spread out over the whole work, as if you looked them up, in these earlier works. I focused specifically, and this is the data put into an Excel spreadsheet, just to look at closely with, I don't know if slides are being shared, but up here you have the number of words, again, remembering 100-word threshold, the max. I focused specifically on the Hayawan by Jahiz, 2.5 centuries earlier, because I thought it would be interesting, knowing that it had hit. And we were able to show that, well, first, that this was probably not such an oral environment as Aladdin wanted to represent. Maxime generated data that showed that the majority of his 2-word phrases, very interesting, the majority of these 2-word phrases actually don't exist really anywhere very often in the whole corpus that we have. So he has made 2-word memorable phrases out of anecdotes, essentially, in the vast majority of cases. And on this basis, I've argued that he is fictionalizing orality. That we can't think of presentations when authors present themselves as oral in simply naive terms, that there's a deliberate sort of fictionalization going on here of orality. The scholar of medieval European literature, Franz Baumel, has written about this. And similarly, you can find this kind of discussions and work on fiction there. The second case, and I'm sorry these are so quick, but I have 20 minutes. The second case deals with the changing forms of books. So our second case study in the history of books. And for this one, I'm personally interested in multi-text compilations. So the majmu'at, the works that are agglomerations of lots of different texts, and partly from a sort of social historical point of view. These, we might call them libraries in miniature. They're like the Reader's Digest of centuries gone by. And I think they can show us a lot about how past books were actually received. Often they're humble, as this one is. Even though it passed into a royal library, I'll show a few more slides, you can see that this is not the beautiful sort of manuscript you might find in the British Library on the website. I began researching in 2015, just this year, a manuscript from Istanbul, and it has 40 texts within the main body of the text, and then it has a further 67 written into the margins. And some brilliant cataloger has made a go at trying to name these works. It's an incredible effort and of learning. 2 minutes. Okay. Just to show you how difficult it is, right? In terms of this, I took a student of mine, Majid Montaza Mahdi, took this fragment here, which runs for 1,100 words, and he transcribed it. And then we used the corpus to run PASM and to determine what work it was. We wanted to know, because the cataloger did not know what this was. It's an Arabic and Persian, I should say. So it's an Arabic fragment that we knew dealt with Abu Muslim, and we ran it through. And to make a long story short, it was from the Akhbar Dual of Abu Hanifa. And interesting, it's from 50 pages. It's from a section that runs 50 pages, and it's 1,100 words. I happen to have read this section a year earlier in a reading group with Hugh Kennedy, and I had no idea when I read the Arabic what this is from, because why would you? I mean, it's 1,100 words taken out in very small pieces. We have this graph then. So this is the fragment, again, with the Akhbar Dual, and the alignments below. I put arrows to where the actual alignment belongs. And okay, so that just gives you an example. With the Majmu'at, what I imagine doing is trying to trace a lot of these fragments and then thinking about networks, thinking about how these works came together, thinking about relationships between ideas and works and people. This Majmu'at was from, was produced in Shiraz in 1352. And it has a really interesting history if you read the various albums in it. But that's another story. So I think that's probably all I can do. But thank you very much. And that's Kitab in its infancy.
So I wonder if we have a short question Q&A session while we're setting up the next 5 centuries. So questions to Persian.
Nice to meet you.
I think I forgot an important question that I had, but it was just less important. Have you done any brainstorming about how the connection or the relationship between multiple texts can be visualized in a way? If you have certain pieces of information, certain passages of text that run through different generations of literature, how you can visualize it? Because if you then break it down again into prose, you're not there's no advancement in comparison to what scholars could do 30 years ago.
Yeah.
For instance. Have you done anything how this easy on a visualizing, but also on a
And shall we start now?
documentation
Because
level? How this can be done?
I need to.
Yeah. We have,
share
I mean,
this,
from the very beginning, I've been saying that visualization is the central part of Kitab. Because actually, when you're dealing with, and I think this is a good case of big data, both because of the size of the corpus and the size of the files that get generated when you produce these alignments. I think visualization is absolutely essential. We've sort of provisionally agreed to start with D3, as a library, and we have how many? Maybe four types of kind of visualizations we're working with now in our heads. But we would benefit enormously from serious brainstorming on that. And I think that needs to be the work really of people in the field. That's the user group if you'd like to join this.
If you don't know,
Yes,
can
but,
I get
no, I mean, clearly, it's essential. It's really essential. Other questions? Yes.
Yes, you promised login credentials.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
And actually, we have a question as well, which would be, are you sharing the bibliographic metadata in a machine-readable format, or is it like, because at the moment you cannot reuse it just from the display that you showed. I wonder whether I can feed it into something else.
Well, no. I mean, right now, the way it is right now, it's actually very limited because it's sort of overloads the system the way it is right now. So it's when you're trying to load all 10,000 titles, just slow. So no, it's not available, but we have to share it, and it has connections to the actual text where it's taken from. So it's in the form of linked data. Not necessarily in the most usable format at the moment, but the format is logical. You can reformat it with a simple script into whatever you cover. And then I think that's something that we could start working on the strategy and contribute, bit by bit to those records, and we'll get a really scrollable usable data, metadata for those texts.
So should we get funding? I mean, we put this into the funding application. We think it's essential. It's impossible to complete that with any funding, but at least we have a person dedicated to the project. We have 2 servers too that are coming up. So
and just to kind of a fun note, it takes about 3 days on the supercomputer cluster to run the comparison between all those texts. Because we take each text, we chunk every text into 100-word passages, because ideally you want to use logical units, but we don't have enough metadata in the text to chunk it into logical units. So we do this arbitrary 100 words chunks, and then we do comparison. So every single chunk with every other single chunk.
So we have it's an information retrieval problem. It's a visualization problem. It's an information retrieval problem. It's enormous. So, do you want to ask? And then you know what back?
Just stretching. Sorry. I'm just stretching.
You're stretching. Okay. Do you want to finish? Do you have another? Is it really?
It's a completely different question, so
Okay.
somebody else, please.
Yeah, I think
I've
so.
already tried to play around with synonyms and WordNet. I mean, when you compare 2 words or 2 passages or sentences, I guess you compare like the exact copies of these. Are you also comparing like paraphrased sentences?
Not yet. So that would be the pre-processing.
So are you playing with the idea?
Yeah, definitely. So for the 5th use
That's a good
case,
thing. That's a good sign.
For the 5th use case,
Just
we
yeah,
would,
just start the presentation.
potentially put a story, and that operates at the level. I mean, it's more complex. So we're trying to move on an engineering sort of basis from the simple to the more complex. And WordNets are computationally expensive to run on that size and purpose. So we're starting, but we would like to.
So would that mean to use like WordNet?
Yes, but there isn't, right now anyway. So it's probably good to put that in.
So okay, we can continue with that.
Then brief sort of conceptual question, if that's
Sure.
possible. I wonder
Very
if
conceptual question.
Yeah, I know. I tried to sell it cheaply, and no, but the question, given that, as you rightfully mentioned, of course, the corpus isn't, even though it's huge, it's of course, not even close to being concise, of course. So the absence of reuse is insignificant as a result, in a way, right? Because you don't know to which extent it depends on the lacuna in your corpus as opposed to lacuna tradition.
Yeah.
So I wonder how you deal with that in a way, given that you can only make, claims on the other end of the spectrum.
Right. Well, no. So in a 20-minute presentation, there's several conceptual things I've skipped. Such as common passages doesn't mean related.
That doesn't mean they're direct borrowing.
No, exactly. Yeah.
There may be something in between. There may be something.
Yeah.
We can at least use metadata. We can at least establish the order. Like the later author couldn't, the early author couldn't copy it from the later author. Right, but what's actually been in between is a totally different story.
It's important for the
The
networks.
chain of, exactly.
It's really important for the networks.
Okay, so let me introduce next speakers. Jerzy Milichka, right, and from Charles University Prague, right? Doing a lot of interesting work as well. We're very excited to have you here. So let's jump in.
Well, welcome to our presentation. In the context of the previous presentation, the title is quite misleading because it seems that we do something different than our colleagues, but it's, I think, totally the same. The question is, what is the difference between quotation extraction and text reuse detection? I think that there is no difference. The only difference is that we did it from the perspective of NLP. In the context of NLP, this is quite standard class of algorithms. This is the name of these algorithms from the NLP, or natural language processing perspective. Of course, it doesn't concern only to quotations, but also on idioms, formulae, allusions, etc. And so it should be called rather extreme detection. The main, I wondered, what is the main difference between our project and your project? I think that the main difference is that from the very beginning, we tended to make the algorithm computationally as less demanding as possible, so as efficient as possible, so that we could apply it on large corpora and to compare file by file all documents together. Let's talk about intertextuality. It's something that has been in the center of.
Next slide.
No. Intertextuality is something that has been in the center of attention of literary scientists for centuries. And a quotation or text reuse is technically for us any chunk of text which is repeated at least twice in the corpus. So formally, it's similar to common phrases, idioms, proverbs, bivarbs, and all those frequent collocations which are studied by linguists and philologists. The quotations and idioms are similar, not only technically, but there is also not a crispy definition, or there is no crispy distinction between idioms and quotations. Like if I say there is something rotten in the state of Denmark, then of course it's a Shakespearean quotation, but it's also an idiom. It can be used also and understood also by people who never read Shakespeare, who don't know that it's his quotation. And it can be also a part of some formula. Like you can say there is something rotten in the Czech Republic, and it's still a reflection of Shakespeare. It's still an allusion on him, but it's not a verbatim quotation, and literature is full of those formulas, and especially old Arabic literature. So the question is how to detect them. The straightforward solution would be to identify phrases that usually introduce quotations, but it's not possible to use this approach for old Arabic literature because in those days copyright wasn't really in use. So even today, citing is not very rigorous, and Pollack and Schillit, who work for Google decided to use n-gram repetition to detect quotations for Google Books. So we will use n-gram repetition, but it's possible to use this for the contemporary English, but definitely not for Arabic, which is not so rigorous about strict strict copying texts, and there are many variations within typical formulas. Even if somebody wanted to quote somebody, then the quotation isn't exact. There are some lexical variation, and the word order is changed so that it's not too. For example, you can see this German sentence, and there are, of course, there are slight differences between those sentences, but actually, within Arabic literature, it would be nearly the same, and I would say that this is the last one is the quotation of the first one. And yeah, and it's typical for Arabic writers and copyists that they corrected mistakes or corrected something that they considered to be a mistake. So we basically need an algorithm that is efficient and very quick, that can deal with word order changes, and that can deal with lexical changes, and which is tolerant to these modifications. So, in fact, the algorithm we used is quite straightforward. It's a deep motion.
It's fine.
Thank you. So it's a part of James Fenimore Cooper, The Last of the Mohican, and we want to find all repetitions of the first 10 words in the rest of the text, in the rest of the book, which is not displayed here, of course, with the tolerance of the various word order, and with the lexeme variability of, let us say, 10%. So 10% variability means that one word out of the 10 gram can be different. 10 gram and decagram. So we begin with the mapping frequencies in the text to each word. And then sort the words according to the frequencies. And now we are sure that the quotation must contain word winding and countless. We can choose any other pair of words, but it's really efficient to choose the words with the lowest frequency. So the word winding is a Hubbard legomenon, so we are pretty sure that it won't be in the quotation. But the countless is twice in this 10 gram. So we can look up this word in the reverse index. Yeah. And here is the context of the second position of the word countless. Let's inspect its surrounding in the neighborhood of this word is suspicious of being quotation. So the word islands is also in the 10 gram, and it's promising. Yeah, islands. It's also in the initial n-gram. So it's promising. Yeah, it still can be a quotation. Let's go further. These two words aren't in the initial n-gram. So but it can be the mistake, the one tolerant word. And now these are two words which are not also in the initial n-gram. So we are pretty sure that this neighborhood, this part of text is not not a text reuse of the initial n-gram. Yeah. The effectivity of this algorithm is based on this property of any natural text or collection of natural texts. That if you have an n-gram, then the least frequent word in this n-gram will be really, really rare, which is and the it's an exponential relation. You can see that this is a log scale, logarithmic scale, and this is not a logarithmic scale. So it's a exponential relation, which is quite interesting and counterintuitive because we would guess without knowing anything about it that it would follow Zipf's law, which is power function, but thanks to the exponentiality of this function, we can be pretty sure that that the least positions will be really rare. So now we have quotations and or idioms, and what is the next? We have many opportunities, and the most striking is that we can make a hypertext out of our corpus. First, we shall introduce our corpus, so please.
Okay, so all of you speak about corpora, so now you've heard about the algorithm, and now I will say a little bit about the corpus, but later on I will show you like two case studies that are connected with this special use of our corpus, which is not the only one, but is the main type of usage nowadays. Our corpus is a diachronic corpus. It's basically based on all these websites that were mentioned here. So it's should we call ourselves friends of Shamil or something like that? But there is a part which came into existence by scanning and OCRing and proofreading and stuff like this. It's about 10%. However, most of the things are pretty same for all the things that have been said about Kitab. Right now we have 420 million words based on edited manuscript. The full text, that's something I don't need to dwell on. And we keep on adding additional information, the metadata, to the texts. This is a work going on and on and on. And we also try to explore ways how to enrich the corpus. Right now, we consider this corpus kind of closed, and we are pretty hesitating in choosing which things should be enriched, because it's kind of destroys the balance. Okay, next slide, please. One of the things that we are using the corpus for is a construction of a network. You can look at the corpus as a kind of, let's say, I used to call it grid. Usually does not agree with me very much, but it's kind of a very similar thing that to what you've been doing with Kitab, those 75 books and 75 books. Only we did the whole thing, the whole axis, with all the. I think it's 2,000 files or something.
It's about 500 million words.
Yeah. I mean the number of files. And this way, it's basically the same. We create kind of links between among the titles, and those links can be of various nature, and the strength of the links can also vary very much according to the number of quotations or reuse that comes from this or that type. And these links can be done across not just the files, but also across metadata and these things. So it's a quite wide range of possibilities. You would call it a data ball. I used to call it the heapiest heap. In a way, you'll see in the next slide, one can get lost in the data because there's really so many that it creates a huge network, and it's only visible via some sound. Can you read it? No. These four things are the books by Ibn Khaldun, and you can see the centuries here, the 20th century, here comes his literature. So you see he's been quoting quite a lot of sources that were available before him, but in the end you see that after him, it was like more or less not interested for the community, and which is contrary to what we know nowadays, so it could be called counterintuitive. It became to be known only in the 19th, 20th century. At least that's the picture that the corpus gives to us. So that's also kind of relevant for understanding the periodicity or the run of the quotations, or the importance for the period. This next one.
Can you show us the first picture?
This one or the
The picture.
picture.
What to do with such a hypertext? We just took a collection of texts and made it a hypertext. And the question is, what to do with such a huge network? We got some inspiration from Google. Like there are in the last years of 20th century, Larry Page and Sergey Brin published some metric how to decide which document is the most important within the network, and we used their metric to make some tool which makes something really similar to Google. I think that it's not really well visible, but at the line at the top, you can.
We're searching for an art
count, like a dog, and there are documents ranked according to importance of the document within the corpus, taking into account that you search for this word. And you can see that there are some words from culture and also from genealogy, because Al-Kalb is quite important Arabic tribe. So you can also combine, this is the second picture, you can also combine, as in Google, you can combine terms and get like this Kalb and Kut. So in this moment, it's more important for adab and culture and less for genealogy. So, we wanted to make it to make a demo, but we didn't pray to demo codes and didn't offer anything, so it didn't work. But you can download it from arabiccorpus.com, and if you have a computer with a Microsoft Windows and the larger RAM, RAM, than 4 gigabytes, you can use it. So please, back to the presentation.
Yeah, and the last thing, more or less, is like a life cycle of it. Let's call it a quotation, where there is a quite famous saying, which has appeared in the history of Arabic literature at the first instance in the 8th century, and it's about how men are الرجال أربعة يدري ويدري أنه يدري, and so on. We have an English version of this.
I'm afraid it doesn't. No,
Yeah.
No, it's.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And so there are four kinds of men. I'll show it on the English version. The man who knows and so on. Can you please go on? Yeah. So you see it's a play of knows, or doesn't know sometimes. The next one. And if he is characterized, then you know what to do. He's well versed, he's unthinking, and stuff like this. So the structure goes like this. There is some statement of properties, he knows, doesn't know, and this combination. And then you know that he should be labeled like this, and then there is an instruction what to do. Avoid him, without him, etc. Next one, please. And there is some variation. There's not much space for the variation in the characteristics of the person. But there is variation of choosing the second position. He's unthinking. You see, so it's a game of kafir, nasi, jahil, nadim. And what you should do, qatluhu, kaluhu, fa'allamuhu, and so on. So there is this type of variation. And if we go on, we can see the life cycle of it. The next one, please. Where we have chosen several types of the instances where this quotation, let's call it, will be used. Well, that's sure. Can be found, and all the target links are displayed here because you know there are lots of variations. So in fact, this is lost. So you see that there is like a history of heritage of this quotation, and some of these things like show up after a long time. Some of them are just limited to the next one. So here we see that Fakhruddin Ar-Razi read only Ghazali's version, and then you see that within our data, Ghazali's version is not present anymore. It's probably interesting that you should search for it nowadays in the internet, on the Google, and you will probably find the Ghazali's version. So again, there is a difference in the relevance for the period. Okay, so those have been some of the usage we make with this purpose, and there's some literature in the next slide. Well, it's not really so much relevant, so the next slide will tell you that. Thank you.
While we're setting up next presenter, we'll go through with questions our presenters.
Could you say more about the Zipf's law point that you were making? It seems like what you're showing contradicts what the normal way of application.
Well, in fact, it doesn't contradict Zipf's law. It can be this curve can be derived from Zipf's law. But
it's not me. Is it me?
Because if you think about it, you would guess that it would follow Zipf's law like everything in text. But well, I can describe it afterwards. It's maybe more. Yeah, it's quite technical.
Just for those who are not familiar with the Zipf's law, it tells you that about half of the words in each text are hypotheses occur on the law.
Oh, never mind.
He'll give you more exact version.
We actually, on the data that's produced with ASIM, we also have all this network data which I've been struggling with over the past couple of weeks, trying to build a network of those sources in the end, which again is essentially a huge spaghetti monster that you referred to. Again, it's like everything is so dependent on everything.
Do you need the link?
You have to figure out how to prune the data to make sort of identify something really like a data image.
You're presenting. Am I good? Yeah. All right. Okay, start the presentation. That's not what are you sharing? Share. Share screen. Yeah, I guess it's like the whole thing. Okay, that looks it's perfect.
There you go.
Yep, go ahead. Hey.
You are again on yourself. Go to Matt. And probably it doesn't work for you now, Matt.
No, okay. Just picking one zero. When I click, that's what happens. Is it already presenting? It is. If you said.
You are presenting to everyone, Matt. You are here on the screen.
Can you switch to to present yourself present to everyone. This? I think this is you. This is you. Oh no. It says you're screen sharing and presenting to everyone. Me? No, me. Yeah.
Matt, you are doing.
Okay, so then what's the problem?
There is no
There's no problem. Just open your. Okay, open your slides. Okay. Should be fine. Okay. I just don't understand where they have that. I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started and be very, very quick. I know we're running short on time. I'm going to try to actually finish this in 15 minutes. And so, okay, so let me say first of all, this research is very preliminary, and its explorations in title is on purpose. This is kind of a first go at something that a method that I want to refine, but I'm very interested in feedback. Okay, so
it doesn't work because you have connected your own.
Maxime, is this the thing for here? Yes. Okay. All right. Are we good? All right. Okay, so why do I want to do computational Persian as a genre and Persian literature? There's this debate over how we categorize early Persian poetry. There's one camp that I might call form-centric camp, represented here by Shafi Penny. He's undoubtedly probably the most well-known, greatest living literary historian of Persian poetry and literature. He, quickly, I won't read the whole quote, but he's saying, there's a reason that Persian Arabic poetry is classified primarily by genre, and he goes on to say, if you try to do it on the basis of theme, basically everything is so overlapping and mixed together that you can't even separate one from another. This is, I think, problematic for a number of reasons, and I won't go into the whole scholarly thing about it, but one of the most basic reasons is this, is that if you look at medieval Persian literary sources of a variety of genres, including manuscripts of divans and other poetic collections, there's a wealth of thematic terms that are used to describe poetry in classes of poetry, poetic types. You can see in this manuscript, for example, in one of the earliest manuscripts of Saint Ali, there are several different types of thematic poems. These categories are often quite rough, but a lot of them are drawn from the classical Arabic tradition, especially like the Muftah poets started writing like the Hamriyat poetry, for example. And in Persian, you see things like Habsiyat, Hamriot, the Saki Name, Vaz or Moise poetry, Zodiot. And the one that I'm in particular interested in are the Kalandariat, which is a type of carnivalesque poetry. I won't go through all the kind of characteristics of it, but in general, it's a type of poem that kind of inverts all the values and symbols that you would traditionally associate with kind of the normative Islamic world. The Quran, Islam itself, it thematizes breaking, kind of what you might want to say Islamic law, celebrating kind of love affairs and things like that. Now, of course, it's part of a mystical tradition, so we can't read these things as transparent celebrations of a libertine way of life. But nevertheless, this is kind of what it revolves around. And as you can see here, this is another early manuscript of Saint Levant. One of the categories here is Kalandariat. This is a poem. I can pull it up at the end. We'll try to move through it. There is some manuscript evidence for this. Several early poetic collections and divans actually use this term, but it's really only seen in the very early tradition. So manuscripts that are coming from 14th, 13th centuries. There's two manuscripts of Saint Esteban that includes a category of poems under this name. They're also in the Mokhtar Name of Attar. There is one of the sections is titled basically on Hamriot and Kalandariat, so on wine poems and Kalandar poems. So we know that this term existed, that it was in use. One of the problems is that one of the manuscripts, its arrangement of Kalandariat poems is to summarize confusing, and it actually doesn't appear that the author probably exactly understood what a Kalandariat poem is, because it's strikingly different than the other manuscript of Saint Esteban and Attar's Mokhtar Nome arrangement and the type of poems we find there. This, amongst other things, has led scholars like Shafi Kankani to basically say he actually, I have a great deal of respect for him. I really like him, but he remarked to me at a conference in Leipzig in the summer that this term is just something that a few scribes use, but it doesn't really have much meaning. I respectfully disagree with this, and I would follow people like Franklin Lewis and JTP de Bruyne, who have argued that not only Kalandariat, but also in the earliest part of tradition Ghazaliyat, which was actually used in the earliest manuscripts to refer to love poetry specifically, not to a ghazal as a formal genre, which it later comes to be, as Franklin Lewis has shown. I think these terms can be quite useful as categories of analysis for the earliest part of Persian poetry. Once you get into the 13th, 14th century, I think their utility starts to change, but that's a larger argument about genre development within early Persian poetry that I obviously can't get into. Okay, so the problem with this position is that there is, somewhat limited evidence for it. Franklin Lewis has done some close reading of Saint-Onie's poetry. JTP de Bruyne has similarly done close readings of Saint-Onie's poetry and looks at the manuscript tradition. And I, in my own research, have kind of drawn together a number of close readings with some more work on the manuscript tradition, and also pulling in a lot more of basically random bits and pieces from different discussions of medieval Persian literature that can be found in this time period. But basically, we need a lot more comprehensive studies to really prove or argue on firmer ground any of these points. This kind of brought me to computational textual analysis. I didn't really start out doing this. I actually had never really even looked at this until about a year and a half ago. But the kind of the need to be able to deal with the whole, wide range of Persian poetry that is being produced in the first 3 or 4 centuries in some type of more comprehensive way to understand stylistic and generic development. It seemed to me, and it still does, that maybe one of the only ways to do that is computational textual analysis. So, oops, moving too fast. Okay, so there's been several studies done, computational approaches to genre by people like Jonathan Hope and Michael Whitmore, Matthew Jockers, the team at the Stanford Literary Lab. In general, they have used types of thematic analysis that are based on what are called LAT or MFW approaches, so language action types, or most frequent word analysis. They use different, they approach this in different ways, which I don't need to get into, but the summary is that, first of all, there's no language action type dictionary for Persian, at least that I know of, that can be used with DocuScope, which is what Michael Whitmore and Jonathan Hope have utilized primarily. And the most frequent word approach is not going to work with poetry. Maybe some very long forms of poetry it could work, but something on the scale of what we're dealing with, it's just not going to be statistically useful. So I thought, what about maybe doing topic modeling, trying to leverage the results of topic modeling to do this? There's not that much scholarship on it. If any of you know some, let me know. All I was kind of able to find was actually a couple of conference presentations by Christoph Schoch. I'm probably mispronouncing the German. Who's actually somewhere in Germany. I can't remember what university, but he's done a couple of studies doing this with early modern French literature. And his results have actually been pretty impressive. So I thought, what the heck, let's give it a try and see how this goes. Topic modeling does work with shorter text a little bit better. So I thought that was one of the other reasons I kind of turned to that. Topic modeling, I won't go into in any depth, but no presentation talking about topic modeling would be complete without this image, which I think must be the most cited image in digital humanities. It's everywhere. But it basically visually tries to explain what topic modeling does. And topic modeling is a type of probabilistic modeling that utilizes LDA to identify the topics that are represented in the corpus of text, and then determine the relative frequency of each topic in each text. Topics in general, Bly has described them in a number of ways: patterns of tightly co-occurring terms, groups of terms that tend to occur together in documents. I will say, though, too, one thing you'll find is that these aren't just thematic. You'll also find other patterns, such as frequently co-occurring rhyme words, excerpts from other languages, and a set of OCR mistakes. So in doing medieval Persian poetry, you frequently get at least one category that is a bunch of Arabic, basically, because it is picking that up in some of the Arabic poems that the medieval Persian poets wrote, or the citations that they use sometimes within the poetry. But topic modeling doesn't actually give you any answers. It really just gives you a framework and a data set that then you have to leverage to do other things with. So what does that framework or data set look like? Every humanist's dream, a giant Excel sheet or some other format of a ton of numbers. Okay, so I took Sanoi's Divan from the Persian Digital Library collection. I used our plain text files, which is after removing all the poems below 4 lines, it came to 704 poems total. What I did is I tried topic modeling with Mallet and R, and actually at the suggestion of Thomas from the University of Leipzig, I went with R, basically because it gives better visualizations. And I used the topic models package in R and the LDA Viz for visualization. Topic modeling for research purposes, is an iterative process. It's a lot of modeling, setting parameters, looking at results, trying to make sense of things. So I went through that probably over 100 times. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised. In the process, I built a stock list of Persian words for medieval Persian that I think is useful. Basically, I pulled out any words from any topics that didn't really carry any significant, I hesitate to say this, but meaning. That's really dangerous. But that's something that needs to be worked on more, and we can come back to. I also manually normalized common plurals and indefinites that were very frequent. Again, a discussion or a choice that maybe we can discuss. So the results, this is what you get. But what do we do with this? So what I did, because I'm interested in grounding myself, both historically and computationally. So what I did is I took the poems in that particular manuscript, the Sanoi's match list manuscript, which is, they think, probably the oldest. And I took the thematic labels that it has for the poems, and I put them onto the files. So if you see in this, for example, you have Sanoi Q and then a number in TXT. If you go back here, you can't see it, but there's GH, Z for the different Zodiot and Azadiot. Okay, so then I said, all right, when you look at the visualization, which I won't show because we're running short on time, but I can show it to you at the end. I went through the visualization, and I basically, it's very clear. Anywhere from whether you set your topic number at 9 up to 50, you get a very clear topic that is basically Kalendariyat. You can, if you know anything about Kalendariyat Carnivalesque poetry, these are the words you're going to expect. You're going to see Harabat, you're going to see wine, you're going to see Galosh, which is a road figure, Kalendar, all these different figures that are just all over this poetry. It comes out pretty clear in a wide range of topic numbers. Even when you get a ton of topics that just you don't even understand what's going on, this one sticks out. So I went in and I rearranged those results based on the category that represented that particular topic. And I was actually I wasn't necessarily surprised as what I was hoping would happen, but the results were actually pretty clear. When you rearrange those poems on that basis of that topic frequency, you get up at the very top. It almost classifies perfectly. I'll just show you before concluding. I took that data and then put it into graphs to represent it a little bit easier on the eyes. If you look, these numbers down here, this is the top percentage of those poems. The poems that get classified there are, it drops off dramatically once you get down to the top 40%. If you then add in the other categories, like the Gazadiot, the Zodiot, the Panegyric, Magdiot, this is what you get. For a first try, I found this quite interesting. You see here, you have the Kalendariyat here. You have Gazadiot come and occupy a place in the middle, and then you have Panegyric poetry, which is very, very infrequently represented at the beginning, and then flies up at the end. The Zodiot is a little bit flatter, but still clearly more clustered at the end, and for reasons that I have some speculations on, but I won't go into. So for a kind of first go at this, I found this very interesting, and I think it definitely indicates that clearly the topic modeling is also picking up something of a coherent thematic type. It's especially clear in the case of the Kadandariot, Gazaviyot, and the Matiyot, the Panegyric. And this actually dovetails really well with Franklin Lewis's argument about thematic genres or subgenres within the shorter ghazals of Sanai. So I think it's convincing on a number of levels, and it does seem to be a promising approach. I will say that there's a lot that needs to be refined. There's a lot that needs to be studied better to understand how changing different parameters, how changing different things in the stock list, all these kind of parts that go into topic modeling, how all those things could change the results. And there's a lot that needs to be done in understanding some of the outlying examples. So what is going on with those panegyric or those Kadandariot poems that kind of strangely show up on the total opposite end of the spectrum? But it doesn't really surprise me that much. It kind of, actually, the general flow of what is going on in this graph is pretty much what a lot of people have already said, that there's clearly these thematic types that overlap with other poems to a considerable degree, and there are both highly prototypical examples, and then there's ones that definitely seem like a amalgamation of two different genres. So it could be an interesting discovery tool as well, I think. But anyways, I'll end there. Yeah.
We actually on a break officially, but please feel free to ask questions, ask many questions, and maybe we'll again just have a quick discussion and just make mental notes. Catch everybody after after we have when we have a larger break of more time. I just wanted probably to make a quick note that Thomas Kremkowski developed a very nice workflow for pretty much shoving anything you have into topic modeling algorithm and then see what you get. And then tried it on my 30,000 biographies, and it's very interesting what you get from there is some kind of a temporal, social, geographical entities. So you've got a group of people associated strongly with Nishapur and with the transmission of Hadith, and it's like 3rd century. So that's what topic modeling picks up on that vocabulary and identifies it. So that's a group. So yeah, well, a lot of this kind of a cleaning of text, and Arabic is probably more complicated in this regard because there's too many prefixes and suffixes and the variations of the same word. But it's also identified really nicely a topic about women in this biography, and what it picked up on were verbs in feminine form. So more than actually like nouns that describe women, mother, sister, wife, but it's mostly the verbal forms in singular feminine. So everybody. So we're gonna take a very short break, or please do ask questions.
If anything goes really wrong, just you can run down and write me an email, and then I'll come up and see what's going on.
Sure, yeah. Otherwise, see you at 8. Yeah.
What?
See you at 8.
Yeah, you're coming.
Can you start broadcasting?
I'm sure that's right.
But I took this and I reorganized the documents by
No.
So then, like, for example, I don't,
The social services were
اول طبقه پنجره دیگه طبقه پنجره یه ذره دیگه آره همه چیز آره همینجا همه چیز فکر
in this announced prominent in one zweite Wort, which
Everybody, I promised to break. Break is over. Break is over. Break is over. Sean, can you mute your sound for a second? I'll introduce you briefly, and then I'll give it to you. Okay. So everybody, let's we have so you okay. Let's try it this way. So we have a next session on will be on Urdu poetry and we'll have Sean Paul from Michigan State University topic modeling. We'll also be talking about topic modeling with Urdu poetry. And we'll have Sheikh Asafjan from University of Calgary and Hamid. We'll be talking about also about Persian poetry. So let's begin. That's the last session for today. So yeah, Sean, please.
Great, thanks. Can you hear me?
Okay,
all right.
Let's begin. This the last session for today. Yeah, Sean, please.
Great, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, okay. Super. So thanks for having me. This sounds like an excellent conference, and I wish I could be there in person. Today I was asked to talk about topic modeling in Urdu poetry, which should tie in well with the previous presentation. And so in very early stages of doing this, so I'm going to give more of a theoretical and speculative paper today than a presentation of particularly satisfactory results. So let me introduce myself. So I'm a professor at Michigan State University, which is in East Lansing, Michigan. It's a big public research university. And my research field is in South Asian literature and culture. And I'm also currently the director of the Digital Humanities program. So we have a... Sean, please stop. Something is going wrong. Okay.
Sean, can it? Sean, can it?
My research field is in South Asian literature and culture. And I'm also currently the director of the Digital Humanities program. So we have a... Sean, please stop. Something is going wrong.
Sean, can it? No, Sean, it's working. It's working now.
Okay, okay. I think we're good now. Can you hear me? All right, I'm going to assume you can hear me. All right, so I'm going to talk about topic modeling in Urdu poetry. And my own work is primarily on modern Urdu and Hindi poetry, and I've recently finished a book on a modernist Urdu poet named Noon Mim Rashid. who lived from 1910 to 1975. And so my new work with the digital humanities is trying to fill in some of the gaps, both in terms of method and also in terms of literary history, which that project exposed. I'm particularly interested these days in doing Can you hear me? Okay, great. So I just want to show you. I'll show you the cover of my book. So this is a picture from the Pakistani artist Zuhur Lakhlaq, and for those of you who are familiar with Indo-Persian literature painting, the cover should resonate in unusual ways, and you can see the way that it's incorporated.
Sean, you're muted.
All right. So, and so in the painting, you can see the way that there are familiar images from Indo-Persian painting and also literary tradition that have been. Somebody keeps muting me. Okay, I'm unmuted now. Am I unmuted? All right. That are being mucked with in a particular way. And so the question is, how do you model the familiar topics from classical Indo-Persian poetry, which are increasingly becoming unfamiliar to most contemporary audiences? All right. My first foray into digital humanities, and we didn't actually call it that back then, we didn't really have much of a word for it, had to do with an online commentary that Francis Pritchett
Now I'm muted. Sean, we're very sorry. We can understand what's going on with the sound, but it's after you say a phrase, it starts repeating several times.
He can shut down his speakers.
Yeah, can you shut down your speakers? Do you have your speakers? Sean, we're very sorry. We can understand what's going on with the sound, but it's after you say a phrase, it starts repeating several times.
Okay.
Yeah, can you shut down your speakers?
Oh, yes. Is that better? Is that better? All right. Is that better? Great. Okay. Super. So. Okay. So, great, super. So my first foray into digital humanities work came with a project that my PhD advisor, Francis Pritchett, was doing called The Desert Full of Roses. And for that, I developed some code to switch between the Devanagari script of Hindi and the Nastaliq script of Urdu. And so I've been thinking about Okay, can you hear me now? All right, I'm using a microphone now, so maybe this will be better. Okay. All right, we good now? Sweet, all right. Okay. So this project I'll show you here is basically an online commentary of the Urdu poet Mirza Asadullah Khan Ghalib. And this is the complete divan. So let me show you an example. So this is the first ghazal. And so my contribution to this basically was this little bar here, where you can switch between the different scripts. Okay, so here's the first line. And are we looping again? Okay. You can see here that there is a list of tags at the bottom, or sets. And so what I want to think about today are ways of expanding those. All right. So shall I just keep going, or?
Keep going.
So shall I just keep going, or? Okay.
Yeah, just keep going, yeah.
All right. So the previous presenter covered this somewhat. So basically what topic modeling is works from the assumption that the intuition that there are certain things that exist called topics, or alternatively themes, or discourses that the words in a document draw from. All that we can see is, of course, the words. And so the question becomes, how do we figure out the mixture of topics in a document, and also which words are associated with which topic? There are various implementations of this model, and also different ways of solving the math problems it produces. It's all pretty tricky. But what is a topic exactly? It is usually, in most implementations, a probability distribution. So certain words are more likely to be associated with a particular topic than others. And these are usually represented as a number, and if you add up all the words in the vocabulary, you get the number 1. So let me show you an example. This is 15 topics from Ghalib's Divan. This is not I just threw this together, so it's not necessarily the best model. But you can see the word dil, or heart, and hot, and khuda, ghar, etc. This one looks a little bit better, so this might make more intuitive sense. You have the heart, of course, and then blood, khun, jigar, which is the source of the blood, mijga, you could think of the eyelash arrows getting stuck in the heart, ishq, of course, andaz, gul. So they're different. So each of these is a different topic. Here's another way of visualizing the topic models, and this is something I'm interested in particularly for the Ghalib site, is a way of doing different types of exploration. And so here, instead of doing a list of words, what I'm showing is actually the topics where the words are actually sized based upon their frequency, or within the their likelihood within the different topics. So this one looks quite good, and mentioned that it's interactive. So there's also the possibility of, for example, being able to click on it and then getting a list of words that are of verses or so on that are particularly closely associated with a particular topic. You can see the word dil is coming up a lot here. Okay. So why topic model? Well, there are numerous reasons. The main one is information extraction. also showing changes over time or in a particular text, comparing one text or corpus with another, and getting access to texts in different ways. That's what I was exploring with the visualization. Okay. So the question I want to ask today is, how does this model of the topic or theme align with Urdu-based rhetorical understandings? And particularly, there is more how it compares to the idea of the mazmun, or the theme, within Urdu poetry. And so here's an example. I hope that you have nice reverberations. I'll recite it. So this is a verse that says, Rah-e mazmun-e taza band nahi. Rah-e mazmun-e taza band nahi, ta qayamat kula hai bab-e sukhan. So this is a famous verse by a poet named Vali that states, the road of fresh themes is not closed. The gate of poetry is open until doomsday. I'll come back to that. So the term mazmun is often defined as theme, or in some critics as a symbol. And in discussions of Urdu poetry, as in Persian, there's something called mazmun afrini, or theme creation, that is distinct from mani afrini, or meaning creation. And both of these two are the goals of the classical Urdu poets. The critic Shamsur Rahman Farooqi, who's a very important critic and author, and also somewhat controversial, he's based in India, he states that, quote, the poets would, quote, convert non-mazmun material of everyday life into mazmun by the means of plain poetic assertions, exemplification, poetic proof, and by pulling together the most unlikely things imaginable. And Farooqi's collaborator, Frances Pritchett, I'll read a quotation from her as well. But both of them emphasize the role of islah, or correction, in the ghazal, whereby an ustad, or a teacher, would correct the usage or extreme variance from established mazmuns of the shagird, or pupil. Farooqi argues that the Indian poets developed a distinction between meaning, or mani, and mazmun, such that, quote, once it was recognized that a poem's mazmun need not be all the meaning that a poem may have, the foundation for ambiguity, obliqueness, metaphoricity, wordplay, verbal congruity, and similar creative devices was laid down forever. Frances Pritchett, in her book Nets of Awareness, Urdu Poetry and Its Critics, has further explained that the mazmun afrini might in common usage be translated as theme creation, but in the case of the ghazal tends, she argues, to mean something like metaphorical equation creation. The process is based on an extended proliferation, freewheeling use of metaphor, one that generates a constant supply of new images, thoughts, and propositions about the ghazal universe. Over time, if a particular leap of metaphor is admired and widely adopted, it undergoes a kind of concretization, becoming a well-established part of the ghazal landscape. As such, it can readily become a jumping-off point for further leaps of metaphor. So in both of these descriptions, there is an idea of an evolution over time. And in fact, the idea, one of the criticisms against the so-called Indian school of Persian poetry, or Sabke Hindi, was that there was a proliferation of mazmun by its critics. Okay. The loop is horrible. We can barely follow. Okay. Well, I'll just show you my last couple slides then, and then I'll sign off. So this is then an idea of what the mazmun is. Do I have speakers on? I do not have speakers on. No, that's not going to work. All right. Okay, so I'll just show you my last couple of slides. So perhaps one way of modeling this would be to think of the resource data framework, or RDF triple, where you have a subject, subject, predicate, and an object that is usually in a graph format. And so you could perhaps think of something like this, where the beloved hunts the lover loves the beloved exhibits cruelty, and the lover suffers cruelty, as a way of modeling the mazmoon of the classical ghazal universe. Okay, I will just stop there and say thanks. If you have any questions, I can I can type them.
Sean, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I don't know. Do we have any questions? It's completely incomprehensible what happened, and is there any questions to Sean?
You said it's very interesting, but we're
Yeah. Yeah, it's Sean. Yeah, we're very sorry. It was really interesting. We really were looking forward to your presentation, but we can't figure out what went wrong. And yeah, well, the slides will be online. It's like you just mute the certain presentations and you go through them. So, Sean, if you as you mentioned, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can't hear you now.
Can you not hear me? Can you hear me? I can hear you. Okay. Can you hear now?
Let's take a short, very, very short break. I'll try to figure to connect the next speaker, and then hopefully we won't have this horrible loop. Yeah. So what?
I'll stop.